All right, let's just dive right in. Have you ever noticed how basically every single gardening product out there is completely obsessed with what's going on above the ground? I mean, think about it. When a plant looks a little tired, we immediately spray the leaves. When we want a massive harvest of tomatoes, we naturally just sprinkle fertilizer right there on the surface of the dirt. But in this explainer, we're going to explore a very quiet, absolutely incredible biological rule that most modern garden products completely ignore. We are shifting our focus entirely down into the dirt, right to the underground engine of your plants, the root system. Because the absolute truth of gardening is that everything a plant becomes is decided in the dark. And here's the kicker. The real secret to unlocking that massive underground engine is, well, it's almost ridiculously cheap. In fact, there's a simple living single-celled fungus sitting quietly in probably every single American kitchen right now that costs literally less than $1. Yet when you use it correctly, it can make a plant's root ball incredibly dense, wonderfully fibrous, and up to 3 times larger than normal. We absolutely aren't talking about some premium $30 tub of synthetic chemicals pushed by big agriculture. No, we're talking about a common, humble pantry staple that most gardeners walk right past every single day, completely unaware of the massive biological power it holds for their soil. So naturally, you're probably wondering, okay, if this stuff works that well, why on earth isn't this mysterious ingredient just sitting on a store shelf for me to buy? If you walk down the fertilizer aisle at your local garden center this spring, you're going to see row after row of rooting hormones. These are mostly just synthetic, laboratory-made copies of the exact hormones plants use to push out new roots. So if our $1 kitchen ingredient produces those exact same hormones naturally, why isn't a major brand bottling it up and selling it to you for a massive markup? Is it some kind of crazy corporate suppression? Honestly, not at all. What this actually brilliantly illustrates is the simple physics of shelf life. See, commercial rooting products, they have to be dead and they have to be completely stable. They need to be able to sit in a sweltering hot warehouse in Texas for 6 months without degrading one bit. Our secret ingredient, on the other hand, is very much alive. The very moment it wakes up, it immediately begins releasing pressure-building carbon dioxide gas. To put that in perspective, it would physically explode a sealed plastic bottle in your trunk within 48 hours. There is simply no preservative out there that can lock this living organism into a long, profitable shelf life without killing the exact thing that makes it useful in the first place. It can't be bottled, which means it just can't be sold. So what is this totally unsellable secret ingredient? Well, it's actually plain, dry baker's yeast. Or, if we're giving it the proper scientific respect it deserves, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. For literally generations, grandmothers have used it for exactly one specific purpose, and that's making bread rise. But what this incredible single-celled fungus does down on a root system is truly unlike anything else you can ever buy in a big box store. When these living yeast cells are introduced directly into the soil at the root zone, they trigger an absolute cascade of biological events that completely transform how a plant grows, literally from the bottom up. Now, what's genuinely fascinating here is how just one single teaspoon of this yeast pulls off 3 distinct biological miracles all at the same time. First up, it delivers crucial hormone signaling. It produces indole-3 acetic acid, or IAA, along with cytokinins. These are the exact same chemical messages that expensive synthetic powders use to tell roots to aggressively stretch and branch out. Second, it creates a rich microbial feast. It releases pre-digested B vitamins and complex amino acids that the plant can absorb instantly on contact, almost like a direct IV feed. And third, it provides serious root defense. The yeast physically occupies space around the roots and secretes unique peptides that actively outcompete and fight off harmful soil pathogens, the kind that cause those frustrating damping off diseases. And this brings us to one of the absolute coolest scientific observations of the last 2 decades. For well over a century, old traditional textbooks taught us that plant roots were totally passive, essentially acting like little drinking straws, just quietly sipping dissolved minerals from the damp earth. But a groundbreaking 2010 microscopic discovery out of the University of Queensland completely rewrote those old agricultural textbooks. Using highly advanced confocal laser scanning microscopes to look deep inside living root cells, researchers were absolutely shocked to realize that roots aren't just passive drinking straws at all. The roots were actually literally eating. They named this wild process the rhizophagy cycle, which literally translates to root eating. Scientists proved that plant roots, like those of a tomato plant, actively pull live microorganisms, like our yeast cells, right inside their own cellular tissue. And once that yeast is trapped inside, things get really crazy. The plant produces a mild superoxide burst. Think of it like a microscopic sci-fi energy weapon firing off a localized chemical pulse. This blast strips the yeast of its outer nutrients, allowing the root to extract precious nitrogen and proteins. Then, in just a brilliant twist of biology, the plant pushes the surviving naked yeast cells back out into the dirt so they can rebuild their cell walls, gather up more soil nutrients, and start the whole fascinating cycle all over again. Now, I want to be super clear about this right now. This isn't just some old wives' tale or internet garden folklore. Peer-reviewed agricultural journals have rigorously proven that this living root inoculant directly and profoundly increases plant health. A 2014 study in Crop Science proved it definitively, showing significantly higher root biomass in both tomatoes and sugarcane. By 2023, the journal Plants was showing an incredible 1.5-fold increase in maize height and root length just by using soil inoculated with yeast. And just recently, a 2024 paper in Frontiers documented highly measurable improvements in lettuce germination and chlorophyll levels. These are undeniably real numbers from very real labs, all backing up a $1 packet of common pantry yeast. But here's where it gets really fun. Out in the backyard, over a full, hot 8-month growing season, the real-world results become even more dramatic than what they see in a tiny petri dish. See, while laboratory trials are typically very short and perfectly controlled, a full outdoor season allows this living yeast to repeatedly work its biological magic week after week after week. When you pull up a yeast-fed tomato or pepper plant at the end of autumn, the root mass you pull out of the earth is often 2 to 3 times denser and incredibly more fibrous than an untreated plant of the exact same variety. So remember this, the lab confirms the mechanism, but the garden confirms the massive scale of the results. So the absolute best part of this explainer is that you have the power to make this incredibly potent biostimulant yourself, right at home in just about 30 minutes. It is that easy. You only need 3 basic things to get started. 1 liter of non-chlorinated water, 2 tablespoons, which is about 20 grams, of plain dry baker's yeast, and 1 tablespoon of plain white sugar. Now, just a really quick note on that sugar, because it gets misunderstood quite a lot in gardening circles. Plant roots absolutely do not need refined sugar to grow. The sugar is strictly there acting as a potent wake-up signal for the dormant yeast cells. It gives them the instant, easy energy they desperately need to break out of their deep sleep and start actively multiplying. Okay, following these exact steps is totally critical to your success with this method. First, you need to ensure your water is warm, but absolutely not hot. You are aiming for a lukewarm temperature, ideally right between 105 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Second, go ahead and dissolve your mix gently by stirring it into a large 1.5-liter glass jar. Third, you want to lightly cover the top of that jar with a breathable paper towel and a rubber band. This lets the building carbon dioxide gas escape safely while keeping any random kitchen dust out. Finally, just let it sit and multiply in a dark place, maybe tucked away in a kitchen cabinet, for about 30 to 40 minutes. You'll know for sure that it's alive and ready to go when a thick, slightly bread-scented, foamy cap forms right on the surface. Now please listen carefully to this next part. You absolutely cannot, I repeat, cannot pour this thick, foamy concentrate straight out of the jar and onto your plants. If it is used at full strength, the sheer number of living yeast cells is so incredibly dense that it will cause a massive, sudden shift in osmotic pressure in the soil, which will severely stress and dehydrate those fine young root hairs. Dilution is simply not optional here. You must mix your 1 liter of active yeast brew into 10 liters of plain, non-chlorinated water. This simple 1-to-10 ratio makes it perfectly safe for your garden and instantly gives you 11 liters of ready-to-use, world-class biostimulant for literal pennies. Of course, timing is exactly what separates a casual little backyard experiment from a massive, overflowing harvest. You have to remember that this isn't a generic weekly fertilizer that you just blindly dump everywhere. It is a highly strategic biological tool. You want to apply this diluted brew straight to the soil at 3 very specific milestones when explosive root growth matters the most. Milestone number 1, exactly at transplant time, to vastly reduce transplant shock and stop early wilt. Milestone number 2, right at the very first sign of flowering. This ensures the newly supercharged root system can physically hold on to more flowers, leading to much better pollination. And milestone number 3, right when the first small fruits begin to appear, which supports the massive, heavy nutrient demand required to rapidly swell that produce to full, ripe size. To make sure this biological brew actually does its job, you've got to avoid a few common fatal errors. Error number 1, using water hotter than 120 degrees Fahrenheit. That will instantly cook and kill the yeast before it even starts. Error number 2, locking a tight screw-on lid onto your jar. That traps the expanding gas, causing the glass to literally burst violently right on your kitchen counter. No one wants that. Error number 3, using old, dusty, expired yeast from the back of the cupboard that simply fails to wake up and activate. Error number 4, trying to save the mix for the next day. If left longer than 24 hours, the yeast population totally crashes and it ferments into alcohol, which will damage your roots. And finally, error number 5, never apply this to your plants during severe midday heat stress. So, if you're sitting there wondering, okay, where do I actually start with this? You definitely want to prioritize your heavy feeding vegetables. Crops like big heirloom tomatoes, peppers, thirsty cucumbers, zucchini, sweet corn, strawberries, and early leafy greens all respond exceptionally well to this biological treatment. Just remember to apply the diluted solution very slowly, pouring it directly onto the dirt at the base of the plant, soaking the soil thoroughly without washing it away. You absolutely want to bypass the leaves entirely. Spraying this on the leaves does absolutely nothing. It needs to sink deep into the soil so those incredible root hormones, the pre-digested vitamins, and the living yeast cells can get to work right away, exactly where they are needed most, deep down in the root zone. It is just incredibly satisfying to realize that a biological technique, one that absolutely rivals expensive laboratory synthetics, comes straight from the back of a normal household pantry. The earth has been remarkably generous with its tools all along, and sometimes the most profoundly useful ones are already sitting right there in our own kitchens, just hiding in plain sight. So, the next time you find yourself walking down a crowded, overwhelmingly expensive fertilizer aisle at the store, take a moment to look back at your own pantry and ask yourself, what other incredible, evidence-backed biological breakthroughs are sitting quietly on your kitchen shelf, just waiting to be activated for pennies?